Hi, welcome to the Møller Institute Leadership Insights series. I'm Sudhanshu Palsule, an associate at the Institute, and I'd like to introduce my friend and colleague Ruth, with whom I've had the privilege of working for a while, and especially on the Explorer Mindset program, which we are co-directors on. So Ruth, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Likewise. So I'm looking forward to having a conversation with you, Ruth, on all things leadership. And perhaps to just start off the conversation, I know we've talked about this before when we have talked together, but let's go into some of the leadership qualities that you think are not only the ones that you admire, but the ones that you've seen as being really effective in the organizations that you worked with or in the world outside. So over to you, Ruth.
Thanks. Yeah, well, leadership qualities, there are so many. But when I think about it, if I had to break it down to one thing that I thought it would be good for leaders to really pay attention to, the main thing I think a great leader does is they work hard to remove any element of fear. And unfortunately, I know this is not the case everywhere, but we do still see organizations and leaders at play who routinely do things, maybe unintentionally, but they do things that create fear. And I think it's often a bit of a shock to us, just how much people can be affected by the way they're being spoken to, or, the things that they are telling themselves are happening to them because of something the leader has done. So for me, if a leader really focused on that and thought, I just want to make sure that nothing I do creates any element of fear, I think that would be a real step forward. And the reason why I think, well, when I was thinking about this before, I was thinking, what creates the fear? And there's two things, and these are two things that you will have heard me say many, many times, Sudhanshu, and apologies if I'm boring you again. But I'm a great believer in the importance of two things in leadership. One is clarity and one is compassion. And I think the absence of those two create fear. Clarity, if we take clarity first of all, that is something which sounds very obvious, but it's amazing how sometimes we're not as clear as we could be. Even though most people are intelligent enough to know that clarity matters. I mean, we've seen it this week, haven't we, with the Prime Minister saying some things to us on Sunday night in this country. And the main criticism afterwards was lack of clarity. We didn't understand what that meant. I mean, previously we had this message, stay home, protect the NHS, save lives. Even though people found it, well, yeah, we get it, we know, at least people were clear. It was very, very clear. When that gets changed, and especially when it doesn't get changed everywhere, it leads to a lack of clarity, and that makes people nervous. And I think this creation of nerves or anxiety or fear, if they could, leaders can use their ability to be clear to really try to work with that. And I also think it's, we often, there is such a difference in the message we think we have given as a leader and the message that somebody has heard. So for me, the big thing I would encourage leaders to do is to always be asking, what could I be clearer about? What is the one thing you do not understand? Not in a accusatory way or a derogatory way or anything like that. But tell me one thing I could be clearer about, so that people can really give that feedback that's needed. So I think clarity is one thing that lack of clarity leads to anxiety and fear. I mean, we know from some of the research that a lack of clear expectations, people find that very, very stressful in the workplace. So clarity would be one. And then the other thing that really matters, in my view, whatever that's worth, is compassion. Really looking for compassion, opportunities to be compassionate. And And you know, why does that matter? Well, that matters because when people feel safe and when they feel welcomed and included and valued, their ability to contribute to the organization is much higher. So they're much more engaged, they're much more energetic, they've got much higher chance of trying something new or suggesting something, or even, you know, giving feedback on something, or commenting honestly about something, because they feel safe. And you know, as you know, there's much that gets talked about in terms of psychological safety, but again, I think leaders constantly paying attention to that and thinking about that is so important. Because fear, you know, fear sometimes, you know, I hear people, and sometimes people say to me, oh no, I think fear is a good thing. You need a bit of fear in an organization. You know, people need to know that I'm in charge. Really? Is it ever a good thing that people feel fear? Because then we're getting, you know, and you know a lot about this from the work you do, Sudhanshu, but people are becoming restricted and, you know, careful with, do I dare say this? Or I'm not going to speak out about that. The repercussions are too high. So, you know, that really, I think fear is the thing to avoid. And we know that people become fearful when they feel they're being judged. You know, so removement of a judgment or judgmental behaviour, thinking about how am I doing against that as a leader, I think is really important. And I think as well, you know, sometimes we say to groups, when are you at your happiest? You know, when just think of a time when you were really, really happy. And most of the time when people answer that, they're talking about when they're with their families, you know, or they're on holiday. You know, I didn't have anything to achieve, or a deadline to meet, or some element of, you know, requirement was made on me and it was all removed. So imagine if leadership could create that in the workplace, where there was, you know, there is not to say there's no accountability or no clarity around, you know, what's required in general terms, but people didn't feel restricted by the pressure of that. And that's really where I think, you know, there are many leadership qualities, but, you know, if you think about, is the organization I am working in or I am running, is it a frightening place to be? You know, would I want my family to work, my children to work here, or my friends or my nieces or nephews? You know, if the answer is no, go and have a look at that and see what that's about.
Thank you. And I thought the last comment you made was really fascinating litmus test, isn't it? Would I want a loved one to come and work at this place? If the answer is no, then you know what's. But before I get to another question, I just want to build on something you said. And this is, you know, if you forget about those minority of leaders who actually use fear as a weapon, if you forget about them for the time being, in your experience, the others who do instill fear in the culture, in the organization, they're largely unconscious of what they're doing, aren't they? I mean, they're not aware of what they're doing. So when you meet these people, either in one of your programs or when you're called in by the organization to come and help them, how do you make them aware of this quality that they have? And are they receptive to acknowledging it? I think that's the question I'm curious about.
Yeah. Well, of course, everybody's different. I would say, for the most part, they are receptive. And in a way, when I think about that, because it's a very interesting question, the truth is, if you practice yourself creating safety, you know, if you are very aware of making somebody comfortable, or, you know, again, being clear about what the process is going to be, and reassuring them, then they are more open. I mean, you will know, Sudhanshu, from working with me, I think both of us, when we're on Explorer Mindset, for example, you know, which we spend a lot of time working on, one of our first objectives is to tell people on the first day, we will not make you wrong. We won't make them wrong. And all, you know, I sometimes think when we say those words, you can see the sort of almost like the relaxation in the body. It's a bit like, oh, okay, right. So whatever this is going to be, this explorer mindset journey I'm going on, and we could talk all day about that. But whatever this is going to be, those two are not going to humiliate me. They're not going to embarrass me. So I do feel a little, maybe even it's only a little bit, I feel a little bit easier to say things if I think them. So for me, when I go into an organization and maybe I'm coaching a leader or working with a leadership team or something like that, my first job is to try and reassure them that they're not going to be judged by me. Yeah, that's what I'm being paid for, is to give them help. But that doesn't mean I have to make them feel less than they are, because who am I to say that? And who is anybody? One of our fundamental beliefs in the Møller, and I know you and I believe this, is nobody on this planet is any better or worse than anybody else. So if we're going and saying, oh, I'm here to tell you what to do, I'm never going to be able to create the trust and the sort of collaborative nature that's needed in order for them to open up and be honest. So I think people do, but people are different, aren't they? So, some people find it hard. The other thing is, I really believe in the power of playing back things to people, really listening deeply and then talking to them about the impact of the words or the actions that they would have on me, and whether that's, helpful to them or not, but really trying to get them to see, maybe to stand back and take some, perspective on it and see the impact. And often people say, I was coaching somebody last week and they said, when you say it like that, when you play it back, it sounds, like, of course I shouldn't be saying those things to, my direct reports or whatever. But in the moment, as you said earlier, I just didn't realize. I'm just doing it. I'm unconscious. So
yeah. Thank you, Ruth. That makes eminent sense, and I love the way you brought up the whole, the setting the context where when you tell someone that you're here to help but not to judge, and the two are entirely different.
Entirely.
Isn't it? And if we could conduct ourselves without judging, I think what an extraordinary baggage we allow to be dropped just then and there. So that's a beautiful answer.
Yeah. Well, it's a bit like, sorry to interrupt you there, Sudhanshu. It's a little bit like, the judgment it's got so many things to worry about in it. One is, that you're making somebody feel, what's that going to be? Where's this going to end up? And we all know that we're all capable of catastrophizing and thinking, things are going to get really, really bad from this. But, it's also like, it's just one dimensional what your view is. You may be a very, very experienced leader who's bringing a lot to the discussion, and fair enough, but not having that, ability to include and to listen to other people's point of view and think about, where this might take us. It just seems to me to be restricting our ability as a leader, I think.
Yes. So talking of restricting abilities, I think you know what I'm going to ask you next. And we've often had lots of conversations in our programs about these things. But if you take a look at leadership qualities, as you call them, which one do you think is the most overrated? Where people posture up to that, but that this is not working. So what are your comments on that?
Well, I think, given what I've said about the importance of compassion and giving people a chance to be their best selves, I think that, this is going to say, when I say this, I think a lot of people might listen to this and think, oh, this can't be right. To be honest, I think confidence can be overplayed. I think because we all want to be, probably, or most of us want to be more confident. We want to look like we know what we're doing. We want to feel like we're in control of ourselves, we're on top of our game. So in many, many ways, confidence is to be desired. So I guess really, and it comes, you talk about overrated, it's the same thing. Overconfident is the thing. And I think you know, I often say, and you know, you've been there with me, I think, when I've said this, that I think for me, and I heard this from a dear friend and mentor of mine many years ago, one of the greatest things a leader can do is to be open to the possibility of being wrong.
Oh,
You know,
beautiful.
I could be wrong about this. I don't know. I'm saying this, but it could be wrong. And so I think when you're overconfident, the inability to question ourselves and to invite the dialogue and the debate, and you know, people saying, well, can I just play devil's advocate? Yeah, you can, because really we want to go for truth, or you know, the best option. So so much in lead, I mean, I think it's really getting better. You know, you and I have been in this game a long time, I think, and I remember when I first started working in leadership, a lot of the courses were about things like, you know, presenting with impact and powerful presence and all this kind of stuff, you know. And there's
Executive presence. Remember that?
executive presence, yeah. What does that mean? So there's nothing wrong with wanting to, you know, feel you believe in yourself and all those other great things. And you know, I'm a great fan of self-compassion and not being your own harshest critic. But I think what then can happen, unfortunately, is that the person who's in the leadership role starts to believe themselves that they know more and that they don't need sometimes to consult as much as they could. And, you know, I think, I mean, I don't know how you feel about this, Sudhanshu, but when you know, we went into the lockdown, I was talking to a lot of my clients and friends and people in leadership positions and people I coach, and I noticed a bit of bravado really at the beginning, a bit of, yeah, we're all fine actually, and everybody's coping very well, and we're very pleased with it all, and you know, this massive, monumental, life-changing thing that has happened to us all. The leader feeling the need to say, it's all, you know, nothing to see here, we're under control. And, you know, I can understand wanting to create a positive atmosphere for people to follow. Of course, we would want to do that. But, you know, also listening to what might not be going well and not deluding ourselves that some people are not, you know, having a great time and making sourdough bread and, you know, getting sunbathing in the garden. They're not. They're living in situations that they wouldn't choose. And of course, we're restricted. So that ability to just, you know, not pretend that something is really great, and try and put this confident veneer on it. I think probably I think that would be the thing I'd watch for. Humility.
And I guess what that does is it kind of shuts down your ability to become vulnerable.
Absolutely.
Right. You don't display that at all, and then as a result of that, you're not allowing other people to express what's going on inside them.
Completely, which is not fair.
Which is not fair.
Yeah, yeah.
I like what you said. So overconfidence of any kind, and it's a very fine line, isn't it? I mean, I'm just wondering. We do want to, you know, in psychology we use the word agency, right? We want to have the agency to be able to have an impact or make change happen. We do want that, but on the other hand, when that tips into overconfidence, it just goes into the negative side. So I do know where you're coming from. Yeah.
I think, you know, the other thing is what maybe, again, I hate to sort of, you know, it's hard on something like this because you're generalizing, and you know, of course, we all meet examples of people who definitely don't do these things, but sometimes I think a leader, especially in times of crisis such as we're going through now, mistakenly thinks, because I'm the leader, I need to look like I'm in charge and I'm going to make the decisions. And the truth is, yes, of course, you know, that's what you're paid for, that's what you're required to do, but we have so much value in our leaders around us, the people around us, you know, who, if we've created a psychologically safe, really psychologically safe environment, have got the confidence to tell us more about what they also think could happen, and you will definitely end up with a better result. It stands to reason. The more diverse the views, you know, even from people that you maybe would never imagine you would consult with, you're going to get a different product. But I think just at the moment, perhaps the crisis sends some people more down the, if I don't look like I know what I'm doing, I'm going to create anxiety in people because they'll think, well, he or she's in charge and they don't know. So everything in leadership in life, I guess, is balance. Where's the balance? How, if I know that that's my tendency and I'm self-aware in that way, and I know that I'm slightly panicked and I'm, maybe I'm sending out 50,000 emails in the middle of the night, what am I doing to, just redress that balance a bit and mitigate it and really use the people around me, because they're also, usually pretty good. So, yeah. You mentioned vulnerability. I mean, talk all day about that, but I think that humility, that being open to the possibility that you're not the only person involved here. You may be the leader, but you're not the only person. And genuinely wanting to get other people's views and then take the decision. I think that works a lot in leadership.
So I guess this quality that you're talking about of being inclusive, and you're inclusive of views that may be very different from your own, right?
Yeah.
Would you say this is one of the qualities that you admire? Would you say there are more? How would you, if you can just tell us about what do you really admire from a leadership perspective? And if you want to talk about it specifically in the current pandemic context, that's fine. But you can begin in a general sense if you want to.
Well, I guess the leadership thing that I most admire, apart from what I've already said about clarity and compassion, I think, I talk a lot in my work, as you know, about purpose, and so do you. And we are big fans of the concept of having a purpose. And for me, purpose matters because it absolutely drives energy. And a leader, I think, is trying, or has responsibility to enable people to feel energetic. They can't create energy for other people, but by providing the opportunity for people to feel a very strong purpose, their energy levels will go up when they're more purposeful. But the other thing that I think purpose does, which is almost as important, I think, is it provides focus, including focus on what you will not do. You will not do. And, I think the more senior one becomes in an organization and the more responsibility one has as a leader, so many people are at you for a bit of your time or a bit of your input or insight or whatever. And for me, a really good leader is crystal clear about what they are for and what they're not for. And not to say that they're not generous in, contributing to other things, but they're not being pulled in directions that they don't know how to stop. People say to me things like, oh, well, at this time particularly, I've got to make sure I'm there for the one-to-ones, and it's taking up a lot of time though, and some of my team were in their homeschooling, one's had COVID, and and they can feel themselves getting stretched even further. And I do think there is a lot to be said for a leader in saying, what am I for? That is a big question, in my life, but also particularly in this job I'm doing right now, what am I for? So a purpose-driven thing. And then, of course, the purpose being more meaningful and more than just a purpose for me, but a purpose for us all. And, you said to me, I could talk about that generally, or the pandemic. The pandemic, we see the fabulous value of a much bigger purpose to find a vaccine, for instance. This is miles bigger than any of us individually, but notice how with that focus you start to see collaboration, you start to see all this usual rubbish we have around, oh, you know, there's not enough time and that has to go to this committee and that has to be approved by that government. No, 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 don't do any of that. Just focus, because the purpose is so important for us to find something to help us through this. And so suddenly, you know, they're making things at Oxford or whatever that they come, it would normally take them 2 years to do in 3 months. This is the value of clearly articulating purpose and having that purpose and it being so meaningful. But also, you know, just driving energy through that and asking people and being, again, back to, you know, the value of involving and including everybody. What is their purpose? And how does that relate to what we're trying to do here? And once those two things are aligned, you know, I think it's a pretty magical place you can end up in.
Yes, and I think I'm going back, Ruth, reminiscing a little bit about the times we have spent together, you know, especially when you have a whole bunch of people who open up to their purpose and start talking about it.
Wonderful.
I mean, they are powerful, powerful moments. And since you talked about purpose bringing us together like this, especially in the context of the pandemic, are you optimistic that once we move out of it into whatever we are moving into, we retain this collective awakening that many of us have gone through of some nature or the other? Or do you think we are going to revert back to the old consumption, overconsumption ways that I don't know. I know you're an optimist, so I'm like me. I hope you're hoping for the best. Where do you come from?
Well, you're right. I am optimistic about it in many ways. And I think it's still, for me personally, I still can't believe that life or the universe has given us this, you know, absolutely incredible opportunity to reset. I think a lot of people are doing this in their personal lives. You know, I was coaching somebody this morning and he said, I've never had so much sleep for 25 years. Sleep, you know, sleep is not a, you know, a sort of thing you can just choose to discard. It really matters to our ability and our longevity. So, you know, I think people are resetting. I hope that governments will reset. You know, we've seen the absolute necessity of the NHS in this country and the carers, and, you know, for so long, groups of people who've been, you know, disregarded in comparison to other industries. So I hope that would happen. But let's be realistic. You know, the individuals are different, and some people will choose to continue with that. And I know a lot of people at the moment are thinking, is this my life? You know, am I taking this now as a chance to think, do I really want to go back to where I was before? And I think that's a good question always to be asking about our purpose and about where we are in our life's journey. But I do think as well that, again, coming back to leadership, it's the responsibility of leaders to look at, where does this take us then? What we've seen is that we are vulnerable. We are genuinely vulnerable. You know, we're so interconnected, it's unbelievable.
Yes.
Everything is getting affected by this. So because of that, where do we need to point? And, you know, in the Møller, as you know, we're very, very concerned about sustainability and about that agenda. Being an Explorer Mindset spends a lot of time on this, and I think it's right to do that. You know, but where does leadership now need to go? And it needs to go, I think, somewhere different. So a leader has huge responsibility to make sure that that agenda is being paid enough attention to, alongside profit. You know, so that, and of course we all want, you know, our economies to recover, of course we do, but that leader, each individual leader, I think, could usefully take this opportunity to look at the way we do things. You know, why are people in the air so much to talk, just like we're talking now? You know, things like this. And I think we've gone around a little bit asleep. You know, we just go around doing things the way we've always done them. And oh, I want to have a meeting with you, Sudhanshu. When can you do? Oh, I can get to Cambridge on this day. Okay, why are we doing this? You know, so we've been woken up, and in many ways, I think we've been given a bit of a favour. But I would really want all the leaders I work with, and I will be trying to encourage them to do this, to stay awake and look at what it was like at this time and what efficiencies you can make, and but how you can really improve the well-being of your people and the planet. That's what I would want.
Wonderful.
Who knows?
Ruth, thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you back in the classroom.
Yes,
Hopefully
I hope
in the
so.
not too distant future.
That would be a pleasure. Thank you, Sudhanshu. Nice to see you. Take care. Bye. Bye-bye.